Thesis statements. Thesis statements' purpose. A thesis statement is the main argument of your piece of writing. It clearly summarizes what you as the writer are trying to say and tells the reader what to expect. Try to view your writing as a wall, with every paragraph being like a brick and the thesis statement like the mortar binding the bricks together. The thesis statement connects all of the paragraphs and holds them all together in a solid whole. The thesis statement should suggest a direction for the paper's development. For example, the thesis statement may be, Keith Dobson's book, I Want to Be Free, shows the limitations society places upon us in our search for real freedom. The next sentence may extend the idea with those limitations include society's need to protect other individuals, the established order, and the powers of control. We can see that the thesis statement suggests how the main idea will be developed. If the piece of writing were to be a 5-paragraph essay, then the 3 body paragraphs could deal with 1. Society's need to protect other individuals, 2. Society's need to protect the established order, and 3. Society's need to protect the powers of control. How and why? A good thesis statement should try to deal with the questions how and or why. We may have a thesis statement like this. The global image of the Asian economy is now very different from its image prior to the 1997 IMF crash in Korea. To develop this thesis statement, we could develop it by addressing the questions of how and or why. We could therefore develop the thesis statement thus. Because of the weaknesses that were exposed in the structure of many Asian economies, the global image of the Asian economy is now very different from its image prior to the 1997 IMF crash in Korea. Or, the global image of the Asian economy is now very different from its image prior to the 1997 IMF crash in Korea, as many foreign investors have lost their confidence in the security of their investments. The new thesis statement gives reasons why or how we can accept the thesis statement. Debatable statements. Remember that the thesis statement should be debatable, otherwise there is little to say beyond a mere description. For example, London is a city in England. After reading such a topic sentence, the reader may feel, so what? The topic sentence here is a statement of provable fact with no argument added to make it debatable. However, if the thesis were to read, London is the greatest city in England, then we have a debatable statement. Added to this, we could then add comments dealing with how and or why. This will not only help to unite the essay, but it also indicates to the reader the direction of the writing. For example, London is the greatest city in England because of its facilities, its cultural diversity, and its role in commerce. Here we have a thesis statement that comprises of a debatable statement plus 3 reasons that show how and or why that statement is true. We also have an indication of the thread of the argument through the essay and what to expect in the following paragraphs. Where to place the thesis statement? When you are presenting or defending an argument, it's good to try and state what the argument is early on. The thesis statement, therefore, is typically presented at the beginning of the writing. Where the thesis statement is placed often depends upon how long the writing is. In a 5-paragraph essay, the first paragraph often acts as the introduction to the essay. The thesis statement is often placed here in the first paragraph and is usually placed at the end of it. However, this is not always the case. For example, in an extended piece of writing, the introduction may well entail several paragraphs. Stating the thesis statement. In stating a thesis statement, we should look at the overall subject, then narrow it to a topic by dealing with a particular aspect of that subject. We then need to formulate an argument on that topic. We can then think in terms of how and or why we hold that argument to be true. Let us look at an example. The subject is punk rock. The topic is the importance of the Sex Pistols. Our argument, which is a debatable statement, is the Sex Pistols formulated a milestone in the development of alternative music. The thesis statement, which shows how and or why, is the Sex Pistols formulated a milestone in the development of alternative music because they showed a generation of youngsters that they did not have to imitate what had gone before. They encouraged musicians to work outside of the corporate mainstream, and they acted as a catalyst for generations of musicians that followed them. Reminders. Try to be. When writing a thesis statement, try to be 1. Intriguing, 2. Worth attention, 3. Suitably complex. Try to avoid. When writing a thesis statement, try to avoid 1. Being trite or irrelevant, 2. Being too emotional, 3. Being too sweeping. Ask yourself, when you've finished writing your thesis, ask yourself 1. Is my thesis statement clear and unambiguous? 2. Is my thesis a debatable statement that requires more information and an explanation, or is it a dead end? 3. Does my thesis statement make such a large claim that it will be difficult to deal effectively with it in the time and space that I have? 4. Do I have sufficient evidence and or argumentation to prove that my argument is true?